Tonight on Ground Crew Command Radio, the main hit piece that the Cabal has put out that's central to the takedown of David Wilcock's credibility, with highlighted parts of this counterintelligence operation clearly showing the sophisticated but contrived nature of this. We'll be exposing all of that today. And if the worst is true, what the Light Forces likely will have done with David's astral self and why this was the cause for celebration, what the likely effects of the end of the subquantum anomaly and dark energy on the surface of this planet will have on your life to create change, the difference between the remaining dark AI consciousness and its machinery and the lurker, why both are expected to have little influence on the surface by July, unless, of course, the 144K can speed this up, and Bilderberg Group leader trial in Brussels, of all places. The entire Bilderberg Group summoned to DC for UCMJ trials. 33rd degree Masons on trial in France. Is all this really true? And of course, the Cabal attempts a desperate assassination on President Trump as part of what is clearly a major offensive by the Cabal. This and so much more on this huge show of Ground Crew Command Radio. You're listening to your loving servant, the Unknown Lightwarrior. And we're back. This is the Unknown Lightwarrior. You're listening to Ground Crew Command Radio, the official speaking platform for the 144K mass meditation group, here to radically speed up and smooth out planetary liberation since 2017. And of course, for all the wrong reasons, we have a huge show tonight. And I know I'm at least 1 week overdue to put out another show. But that obviously the commotion, the chaos, the uproar over the seeming passing of David Wilcock's life is, at the top of everyone's mind, and a lot of fury out there at not only his, let's just call it disappearance for now, but there's a major counterintelligence operation to not just discredit David Wilcock, but also and the reasons, the official reasons given for his passing, but also to discredit you and me, all of us, Starseeds Light Workers, Awake and Aware, etc., that know what's going on. There's actually a big attack, a major offensive on our credibility, and to heavily discredit the whole Awake and Aware world, basically. And I'm going to get into the details of that, and I will be torpedoing and tearing to pieces a particular article put out, and I will be naming names. Although in all fairness, I don't know if he's the one that really put it out. The name is Jordan Sather. Long-time favorite for many of us. He did great work up until he got taken off YouTube. But the article that he allegedly put out, it sounds like a classic deep state psychological warfare masterpiece. Full of holes, full of yeah, full of holes, and I'll get into that in a moment. But clearly, most of you know about all those scientists and engineers missing or murdered. All right, obviously, General William Neil McCaslin went missing. He was a U.S. military general all about UFOs and disclosure. Amy Catherine Eskridge, anti-gravity researcher. And we can go on, right, with almost at least another 8 or so scientists, contractors, engineers, etc., that have mysteriously gone missing by sheer accident. Obviously, we're dealing with the usual gangsters known as the Deep State, aka Cabal. And let's get right into it. The first theme or connecting thread between all these deaths, including David Wilcock missing, let's just say. I'm not going to say he's dead quite yet, but missing, definitely missing, or out of the picture, is that, they all were related or connected to science developments, esoteric science and engineering, anti-gravity, UFOs, etc. And by sheer coincidence, David Wilcock was in the process of launching, I think it's called Stavati Aerospace, if I remember correctly, manufacturing anti-gravity craft as well. So that's a direct commonality with Amy Catherine Eskridge, the anti-gravity researcher. We've got Michael David Hicks, NASA research scientist, and so forth. So we've got an anti-gravity esoteric technology thread between all these missing individuals, including David, good old David Wilcock. And so, that's your first clue. Okay, it doesn't take an Einstein or a genius to put that common thread together. Again, the deep state is what it is. We're quite well enamored and familiar with how the deep state / Cabal thinks and operates. So that's the first giveaway. I was about to say suspicion, but giveaway. And I'm going to get right into, I call it a hit piece because it is what it is on all of us, not just David Wilcock. And it's allegedly put out by Jordan Sather. And I'm going to highlight the parts that makes it a dead giveaway that this is a counterintelligence operation. This particular article, okay, and clearly showing the sophisticated but contrived nature of this. Now, many of you who saw Jordan Sather's article, you will have heard the audio that was put out by Boulder County Sheriffs about the whole incident call. Now, most of you know that the Cabal or Deep State more than has the sophistication, resources, and capacity, even to this day, to concoct such a thing. But even if that audio put out to the public by Boulder County is genuine and authentic, we have to consider two things. All right, so let's for a moment just presume or assume that the worst is true, okay, and that he did commit suicide. And I'm going to get into all the holes in that as well. We all know about voice-to-skull electronic warfare. They can almost drive a person to do whatever they need them to do. We all know about, 144K members, for those of you who attended that clearing and training webinar a few months ago now that black magic, it opens up portals inside one's AP, okay, the assemblage point. Okay, for those of you who don't know what the assemblage point is, you can look it up. And it opens up portals, and whatever predisposed psychological weakness or stress or fear or whatever that you may have to one degree or another, the darkness that comes through those portals, it amplifies all of that by at least 10, more like 20. So if you're predisposed to anxiety, it'll multiply the anxiety by a good 10 to 20 times. If you have dread or fear over some sort of bad situation or some kind of sense of doom and you don't know how to get out of it, but you're coping, okay, it's a background stress and you cope, the black stuff coming through those portals in the AP will multiply it by a factor of 10 or 20 to a point where it puts the targeted individual truly at their wit's end. Now, I'm talking from personal experience here. You know, when I was getting targeted through black magic, whatever soul fragment retrieval I would do, it was only a temporary fix. I would do the 5 archways of shadow work process, and it only lasted for the benefits, only lasted for maybe a day. Then it was back again until I discovered and saw the portals in the assemblage point. And I closed them. There were quantum tunnels coming out of them. I would close those portals. There's usually between either 4 or 6 of them. Close them, clear the quantum tunnels coming out the front end and back end of the assemblage point, which is kind of like a horizontal tube coming through your chest and out your back. Okay, it's a horizontal thing. And I'd be fine, gone, done. You know, but if you don't know about that and how to handle black magic targeting, yeah, it's rough. It's really rough. So to briefly explore that possibility or path, he would have been black magicked. He would have been targeted with electronic warfare, where his, $1 million tax bill to the IRS, may have been too much for anyone. Okay, so I'm just going to call that a possibility. All right. So let me hop on over. So if you are a target of black magic, check for portals in the center of your chest. You don't have to see the assemblage point itself, and just turn them white and then close them and shrink them close. And you may still need to transmute an entity or two because they really jump you when you're in a compromised state. Again, I haven't got time to walk you through that because that's all part of free tools for the 144K mass meditation group. You can join the 144K, by the way. Link is just below in the description. It's free to join. But anyway, the point is I want to go through the article allegedly written by Jordan Sather. And I say allegedly because, important background here. Some of you may remember John Kettler back in, 2010 to 2012, somewhere there. He really was he had amazing psychic connection to higher beings of some kind. I can't quite remember. Carrie Cassidy of Project Camelot interviewed him at the time, and that's how he burst onto the scene. And he had a great blog with very revealing, great intel and articles. I used to follow him. Some of you might remember him. John Kettler Investigates. JKI was the name of his blog. And I would follow him for quite a while. And then one day in late 2012, his writing completely changed to an overtly blatant neocon style of, Bush, Shaney neocon style of writing and languaging, where he was all of a sudden decided to seriously attack President Obama for not starting war with Iran back in 2012. Completely different writing, very different writing, different language. The spark had gone, the spirituality had gone, the uplifting, revealing insights all gone, and I couldn't even get through the second article. I stopped following him, and I'm sure most people did. So something happened to him. Either his blog was hacked and taken over, and he lost control, or he was taken out because he disappeared, never heard from him again. And someone masquerading as him started publishing articles on his blog. So the same sort of thing crossed my mind when I started reading Jordan Sather's piece, because this is not the Jordan Sather that I always knew. I mean, I never really followed him much. I briefly followed him here and there before 2020, before his YouTube channel was taken down. So keep this in mind, that we all know what the Cabal is like. Okay, we know how sophisticated its games that it plays can be. So let's begin. All right. This is just a little further down from his article. The family statement included within the police timeline confirms that David was dealing with serious financial problems as well as major depression. Well, hang on a sec. He's been screaming bloody murder about his $1 million tax bill to the IRS since early 2025, and really stressed out about it back then. What now is going to off himself over that? He was getting donations every Sunday to cover his basic expenses just fine. He's going to allow himself to commit suicide over the IRS of all organizations. Are you kidding me? Anyway, that's one major hole, and it's a big one, Mr. Deep State Man. All right, this screenshot is only a portion of the family statement. The rest can be read by clicking these hyperlinked images. It was a very well-written statement. Yeah, cough, cough, I'm sure. And captured the essence of the moment well. David Wilcock took his own life on April 20th after a long struggle with depression and overwhelming financial debt. Yeah, like half of all starseeds have got depression these days. His family and chosen family hope this loss encourages more focused attention to mental health care access. Well, that's kind of lame and contrived. And kind of notice the sterility to that kind of style of writing. How sterile it is. David, okay, blah, 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 blah. He was a curious, sensitive, and introspective child, drawn to reading, science, research, and questions about how the universe works. He spent much of his time journaling and developing a vibrant, imaginative inner life. So his inner life and all the things that he wrote about, how many books about, that's scientifically based on provable science, is imaginative all of a sudden. He laughed easily and had a big heart. He loved animals, meditation, music, science study, and lemon cake. Because you're going to make it sound very personal and dimensionalize that intimate aspect of his little quirk, like lemon cake. That's the first I knew he was into lemon cakes. From childhood, he had a deep curiosity about telepathy, lucid dreaming, the occult, palmistry, and the predictions of Nostradamus. Like many young people, he experienced painful periods of struggle and difficulty because you got to build up the suicide narrative, right? All right, so then he gets into the 10-minute audio recording between 9/11 dispatch and police officers on scene during David Wilcock's suicide. A police officer can be heard saying, "Type 1 diabetic is out of money." So a police officer just arrived on the scene is all of a sudden going to know he's a type 1 diabetic and out of money. What, did David tell him that straight out? Apparently what dispatch was relaying to the officer from what David told 9/11. So how many of us are out of money? How many of us have serious health issues? And we're just going to feel like committing suicide. It's almost like the average starseed story. All right. You can listen to the communications radio dispatch below if you would like. Portions of this were tough for me to listen to. Well, I listened to it a full 10 minutes. Again, pretty emotionless and sterile from the police officers. Although I can understand that because they deal with this sort of thing every other day. But anyway, I'm sure someone may have a FOIA for body cam footage at some point, but we have enough evidence here to get a clear picture of what happened. Well, no, because we have no clear picture of what caused him to commit suicide voluntarily. Okay? Because again, worst case scenario, let's all assume that did happen exactly that way. What drove him? Again, the $1 million tax bill to the IRS, depression, loneliness, and money shortages, causing him to do his live streams every Sunday where he got plenty of donations. That's been going on for a while. Why now? Well, I'm going to get into why now. My reaction and David's struggles. I was driving when I had received the news of the first Boulder Sheriff's article, the death investigation. As I saw the photo of David's house, the realization hit me that it was him. Okay. As I saw the photo of David's house, the realization hit me that it was him. My jaw hit the floor as I was processing what happened. I completely missed my turns and kept driving. I was in shock. Well, Jordan, I didn't know you were that good a rider, for starters. Very well dimensionalized. Even I don't write like that. Although the realization also hit me as to what David had been suffering through for years. And while I was shocked, I was not shocked at the same time. I'm sure you weren't. And by the way, this is great storytelling script where properly trained storytellers, they know to begin with what they were doing at the time, what action they were taking at the time, whether it was walking or whatever. You got to tell the action, and then you got to say what you were thinking at the time. Okay, it's classic storytelling script principles that if you learn storytelling, that they tell you those things. To what were you doing at the time and what were you thinking at the time before something happened. So that's, and obviously the deep state or CIA operatives, they're going to know that kind of thing of how to tell stories because it's got to grip a person. It's got to sound believable. It's got to be dimensionalized. So that's the other thing that stood out to me. I thought, wow, this is some impressive storytelling, professional level storytelling by Jordan Sather, your average so-called truther. Again, that's assuming that it was him. He continues, although the realization also hit me as to what David has been suffering through for years, because you got to build the backstory to substantiate the suicide, to back it up. That's what they're doing here with that sentence. I was shocked at the same time. He was struggling immensely with self-inflicted stresses. What do you mean self-inflicted stresses? What do you mean? I'm not even going to call him Jordan anymore. I'm going to call him CIA man. What do you mean CIA man? Self-inflicted stresses that he had a difficult time handling. Well, judging by his last live stream, let alone almost every live stream for almost a year and a half now, they seem to be handling it okay. Anyway, let's move on. I've been told that I'm cold-hearted. No, but you are CIA. And lacking empathy for my reactions and postings online related to David's death. My empathy is the understanding of the feelings of another. Okay, well, that's, again, brilliantly written for all the wrong reasons. So now he's got to talk empathy, like he's the empathetic one, or whoever wrote this. I'm not convinced that it's Jordan. Empathy does not mean having some fanciful, wishful thinking. Happy-go-lucky, fake positivity mindset. It can also mean I understand why they were suffering and why that happened. Okay, because now he's got to clarify his empathy. Okay, I have to call a break. Something has occurred. Obviously, I'm over the target here. Okay. I just realized I'm taking way too long on this article, so let me just move through it quickly. But I will have to spot the holes. I understand that David was suffering through and why, and sadly empathize with what we choose to do. I wish he could have been strong enough to handle his problems differently, but unfortunately, that was not the case. Well, again, he was handling his problems. I think that I think what is truly cold-hearted is twisting the facts of David's stories for amplification of some personal pet narrative or fanciful story one wants to believe in. Okay. I've been told not to read the article anymore because I'm taking too long. Several places he mentions the word conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists. And that's the classic and that, to all of us, the word conspiracy theory, to all the awake and aware, is like a major 4-letter word, let alone an insult. Because now, in the article, whoever wrote this article conflates the awake and aware and us and David Wilcock and what we're all about with conspiracy theories, all right, to draw that connection. It's undoubtedly a part of a counterintelligence operation against all of us, not necessarily just David. And saying that he, was struggling and was struggling with depression and financial woes, and him being empathetic and so on and so forth. And he also, points out other screenshots of other people, including Kerry Cassidy, all pointing out what they were saying and basically discredit. And he admits he hadn't spoken to Wilcock since 2020. Well, a lot's happened there. So within this long article, other well-known people, Corey Good, Kerry Cassidy, etc., are attacked and discredited as conspiracy theorists. And of course, conveniently finished off with lessons to learn and so forth. Clearly contrived, clearly taking the moral high ground and clinical level-headed positioning and stance. From a storytelling perspective, it's very professional. Your average truther is certainly not a professional storyteller, all right, with all the I's dotted and T's crossed in terms of the principles of storytelling. And because I'm trying to keep this to well within an hour, I'm going to let this article go because it goes on for a while. I'm just going to finish off by saying that, it is clearly a, what's the word I'm looking for here? An intelligent, a central part of an intelligence, a contrived intelligence operation to take over the narrative and set the narrative, because we all know what the Cabal does. It sets narratives, and anyway, I can go on, I can tear this thing apart, but I don't want to take too long. I need to move on. So I'm not convinced that Jordan Sather has that kind of writing ability, especially with languaging and verbiage that is classically used in Cabal media and Cabal hit pieces. It's the same style of writing. So, yeah, conflating all of us, let alone David Wilcock, with two conspiracy theorists and conspiracy theories is that's a dead giveaway. Moving on. Actually, I did want to read this out. This is a post on YouTube, I believe, on David's last live stream off memory. It's from Freedom Fries 369 from 4 days ago. I'm a personal friend of David who just learned of his passing. I was at his wedding and have known him for 17 years. David's stance on the karmic implications of suicide would have prevented him from taking his own life. He believed the price of doing so would be enormous, and he believed in his mission in this incarnation, no matter the cost. I do not believe the official story at all. Which says it all. I do remember him talking about you never commit suicide for those reasons. Never, ever do that. Anyway, what the Light Forces likely did with David's astral self, and why this is a cause for celebration. So if the worst is true, and he was triggered or driven to suicide, the Light Forces have him. With the soul trap gone, the non-physical planes cleared, as I said in the previous article, teeming with Light Forces, the chances are extremely good that he's doing very well. He's probably up on a ship somewhere, most likely. almost certainly. If the worst is true, and he hasn't been taken into a witness protection program or anything like that, you know, um, there's, what's his name? John F. Kennedy Jr. There's so much talk and enough credible evidence that he's still alive. All right, so who knows? God knows whoever wrote that article certainly doesn't. But I want to give a big kudos and salute to James Gilliland. Him and I think some others did a quick sort of clearing or process to ensure that it went up through the fourth dimension into the fifth density. So that's great action taking on the part of James Gilliland. Big salute to him on that one. Another so-called conspiracy theorist, according to the so-called Jordan Sather article. Anyway, so that's the deal there with his. Well, we all know there's no such thing as death, and we drop the physical body, but our real essence and who we are continues. We all know that. All Starseeds know that. All right, so I'm going to put the David Wilcock story aside, and possibly to be continued later. And rest assured, his legacy, his spirit, will live on. The 144K will honor and continue his legacy of. One thing that I appreciate about the guy is he's the one that really popularized in a big way, in a continuous, consistent way, the Maharishi effect. Everyone's heard him say how many times 7,000 meditators meditating and dropping the crime statistics down by 73% or something to that effect. And I mean, and he's been saying that for how long? Since at least 2009, as far as I know. And that was one of several inspirations for the resurrection, I should say, not founding, but resurrection of the 144K mass meditation group since 2017. We've been hard at it, doing 1 to 2 hour psychic surgery kind of mass meditations because we find that much more effective. And all that was originally derived and developed quite organically from my own healing, my own internal work, which eventually branched out into clearing on Gaia and humanity in this special advanced 144K mass meditation style. And that eventually blossomed into the 144K itself in 2017 when we officially launched. So David is one of those inspirations. It's not only Cobra or anyone else like that, or David Icke for that matter. But he really popularized the Maharishi effect, and his legacy will be continued in the 144K. I think we've got the next mass meditation on the coming full moon, May 1st, another ritual day, May 1st. So that's our next mass meditation. You can join through the link below if you're interested. Anyway, we need to get on to the likely effects of the ending of the subquantum anomaly and dark energy, and what will they have on creating change in your life. Now, those who are Cobra-centric will know all about the subquantum anomaly and dark energy. For those of you who don't, subquantum anomaly is simply kind of like random chaos particles But at the quantum and subquantum level, dark energy is fairly self-explanatory, which is energy that's simply reversed, back to front, inside out, the exact opposite, and contrast to source energy. All right. And it's heavily concentrated at this point. It's been cleared throughout the multiverse, apparently, even this solar system, and now it's just concentrated and contracted and retreated all the way back to the surface of this planet, affecting our lives and delaying planetary liberation as part of what we clear and speed up the clearing of with the 1 to 44K mass meditation. That's just one example of what we focus on. Anyway, so upon the clearing of the subquantum anomaly and dark energy on the surface of this planet, you can expect a minimum 50% drop in that background charge of fear. A minimum 50% drop in any kind of resistance you feel when doing something or endeavoring to do something. A minimum 50% improvement in being in the now and your mind not always in the future, which is where a lot of the fear comes from. You can expect a minimum 50% improvement in flow, ease, grace, and flow. A minimum 50% increase in personal confidence and dissipation of fear. And that's minimum. Could easily be 80% improvement. And that's what you can expect upon, in terms of personal effect on your life, with the subquantum anomaly and dark energy being cleared, which is, according to Cobra's recent post, only weeks away. So that's great. It means it's under a month. And God knows we've spent a lot of time, and 144, and a lot of consistent effort in, as always, accelerating the diminishment of the subquantum anomaly and dark energy, initially throughout the multiverse, then solar system, and then this planet, and now the surface of this planet. It's very minimal anywhere else, very minimal. So some may need clarity between the difference between the remaining dark AI consciousness and its machinery and the lurker. So I'll get into the lurker first. The lurker is kind of like a single. It quickly became a singular dark consciousness, but it originated from what sounded like negative ETs in the previous universal cycle. All right, so we got universal cycles where the universe contracts back into the one ball, the one point of singularity, and then it does the Big Bang, and that's when it's rebirthed, and it's in this next incarnation as a universe, essentially the same universe. So that's a cosmic cycle. Anyway, so in the towards the end of the last cosmic cycle, certain negative ETs try to escape it because they were going to die, they were going to perish when it all contracts back into singularity before the Big Bang occurs again. And the way they escaped, or at least attempted to, was it was inserting their consciousness into subquantum level of reality or physicality. So there's quantum, there's subquantum. But that process heavily traumatized them, to say the least. And then it eventually morphed into one consciousness. And as you can imagine, it was pretty damn dark when the next universe, and it survived at the Big Bang, when the universe rebirthed itself. And And there it was at the subquantum level, beginning to wreak havoc and infiltrating and infecting and manipulating quite a few ET races that themselves eventually and inevitably went dark. Very pervasive in nature. Yeah, big issue. And the SSP, Positive Militaries, always knew about this as well. It's a fairly well-known thing within the insider community. Anyway, the dark AI consciousness is there was actually thousands of AIs, each with their own roles and responsibilities, but the main background one, and this machinery, that was developed by, well, the biblical term is fallen angels. Apparently there was, oh God, 9, the original extensions of Source. 7 of them decided to do their own thing. 2 of them didn't, and decided, no thanks, I'm going to stick with Source. And seven of them went their own way, and they're the ones that developed what's really artificial consciousness. They all put a piece of their consciousness and essence into it. It's artificial consciousness is a better word for it. I wouldn't call it artificial intelligence, because last time I checked, at the very beginning, most primordial eras of time, there weren't any mainframe computers and data centers, needless to say. But anyway, so artificial consciousness is a better word for it. And this was way before the formation of universes. Okay. It's far more primordial than the lurker. And that's been getting heavily diminished, and will continue to get diminished. And to move on to the next point, both are expected to have little influence on the surface by July, unless, of course, the 144K applies its well-proven record of speeding up the process. Okay, because at this point, I mean, we can avoid some bad timelines and continue to increase and improve and upgrade the timelines, but nonetheless, planetary liberation is unavoidable. The trick is, as most 144K members know, the trick is to speed up planetary liberation. All right, that's the only question mark over this whole thing. How much can we speed it up, but also smooth it as well? So that any so-called civil unrest is minimized, ineffectual. Any violence is minimized and ineffectual. Release of the QFS sped up. All right. The initial economic collapse before the QFS is launched, minimized. Half the time, half as long. Now, this sort of thing is what we specialize in. And we've been doing it since 2017 very successfully. The news always improves. Things don't turn out to be as bad as we had feared or we were warned against. The lockdowns, for example, was meant to go for a minimum 10 years. It lasted 4 or 5 months in the US. Maybe a year in some other countries. So that's a good example of minimizing harm and calamity and pandemics and smoothing the process. So it's a way and speeding up all such diabolical plans. All right. Now, Q the Storm Rider, who's over on Telegram and Patreon, he revealed, and this, I don't know if it's a former Builder Group member or the current one. Builder Group leader on trial in Brussels, of all places, like one of the capital cities of the Cabal itself, Brussels, on trial there. Okay, now he had to put a question mark in it because this is very sensitive insider stuff. The Bilderberg Group itself, 150 of them apparently, summoned by the US military to DC for certain trials and testimonies and plea deals, I would imagine. 33rd degree Masons, I don't know how many of them, on trial in France. Another Cabal stronghold, at least for now. Although France does have a powerful, positive military faction. Okay, this is what Q the Storm Rider has recently revealed in his past few days. So that's unprecedented, even at this point. That's unprecedented. With this sort of unprecedented and previously unheard of events going on, can you be surprised that the Cabal has launched this blatant offensive at this point, with all the missing or dead scientists and David Wilcock, who was clearly targeted? Okay. So this is a big part of what the Cabal is responding to and why it's had to launch its offensive to try to make the Light Forces, which includes us, you and me, by the way, to sort of back off or try to intimidate us, confuse us, argue amongst each other, which was one of the goals of the alleged Jordan Sather article. So understand, have that perspective, be aware that that's what's going on. They're fighting back. It reminds me of the Battle of the Bulge, where things look down and out for the Nazis, so they launched that offensive to try to save something or delay. Anyway, is it hardly a surprise that the Cabal has launched this offensive? And such things means that the positive military alliance have achieved critical mass control of the planet. Otherwise, you can forget about summoning 150 Bilderberg Group members to DC. 33rd degree Masons on trial in France. There's no way knowing that sort of thing would be happening if the positive military and the Light Forces had achieved critical mass control over the whole planet. So, what was I going to get into now? So they have to do something through this counterintelligence operation centered around David's alleged suicide, and they got to respond with something, because Q the Storm Rider also mentioned that the Bilderberg Group were told that if they don't show up to DC, okay, for these trials, that the White Hats, predominantly the US military, would delete all their bank accounts, both personal bank accounts, trust funds, corporate accounts, the lot, of said Bilderberg Group members, of all people. So clearly the positive military have achieved technological superiority. All right? You military history buffs will know all about air supremacy and air superiority in the air, for example. They've achieved technological superiority. Otherwise, you would never even imagine making such a threat, let alone unless you could really do it. It also means that everything above the Bilderberg Group is either gone or gone. which is huge, needless to say, profound. And so here we are, the lower level deep state operatives, okay, because they still have a network of mercenary and MK Ultra victim super soldier types that can be activated. CIA contractors, the usual story. They're still around, no doubt, and that's what was behind as part of the Cabal's offensive that it's had to launch. Really, it's more like a defensive measure, but anyway, this offensive that the Cabal has launched, there was an attempt to assassinate President Trump at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where all the journalists get together at the White House dinner. And the assassin couldn't get past the staircase. A Secret Service guy took the bullet. He had a vest on, so he's got a pretty bad bruise there. But shots were heard from inside the main event, the main room. But nothing was able to enter or get past that brave Secret Service guy. He was stopped right there. So they couldn't even get into the room. Okay. Before, in previous years and decades, the Cabal operatives would have no problems getting into the room and at least almost being on target on the president. So technically, it's kind of a lame attempt and desperate attempt to assassinate President Trump. Now, there was talk that Vice President J.D. Vance was the first one escorted out. They jumped all over him, the Secret Service guys, and escorted him out. That's likely because that is the real J.D. Vance, whereas Trump at the main table on one end of the big room, he was almost certainly another one of his doubles. So that's why they focused on J.D. Vance first. So again, like I said, all part of a major offensive. And if more of you want to hear me tear that alleged Jordan Safer article to pieces on the next show, just leave a comment below this video. And for those of you who've never heard of the Resurrected, as I like to say, the Resurrected 144K, just you can check out the website and join the 144K mass meditations we take, because we really do take energetic matters into our own hands at a whole new level. All right. Yeah, they're not liking that. It's like it's taking the Maharishi effect and putting it on steroids. Our mass meditations last between 1 to 2 hours. And in the past, they would go on for 2.5 to 3 hours because there was a lot to clear in the past. It's basically psychic surgery on Gaia and humanity, and in many cases, the universes and multiverse. You don't have to be a great psychic seer. You don't have to be a great visualizer. We show you how to really connect with your soul, align with it, to get the guidance from your soul to do what your specific soul mission, purpose, and task is at a given moment. Okay, very unique form of mass meditation. That's why we call them advanced mass meditations, although anyone can do it because the guidance is that good. It's free to join. So check out the website. If it resonates, yes. And if you're drawn to it, of course, join. And you'll be on the notification list. And, of course, notification list for such Intel Planetary Liberation updates. So, again, leave a comment below if you want me to continue to tear apart the alleged Jordan Sather article on ensuing shows. And David Wilcock, if it is all true and you're not in some witness protection program, it is not in vain, not in the slightest. So it is not in vain. I'm going to hold 1 minute's silence, though I would ask you to hold it with me, in honor of David Wilcock, who really pushed for and popularized the Maharishi effect. And he literally said in his last live stream, I don't want to be the only one guy doing mass meditations, because if something happens to me, then that's the end of that. And so we're going to honor that. And I'm going to start the timer on my phone for 1 minute silence for David Wilcock. Admittedly, under the presumption that the official narrative is true and it's not just some, classic deep state op, stereotypical deep state op. But again, even if it is true, they almost certainly would have used at least those two methods, black magic and electronic targeting, to drive to where it makes it look like a tidal wave, and most people would succumb. So I understand. 1 minute silence starts from now. David Wilcock, we will see you at the event in the physical.